So I'll say welcome to everybody. It's been a while since we've had a webinar for our CLC meetings, so we're all kind of getting back up to speed with how to do this, but it looks like everybody's connected by the phone, and as we usually do, we start with all the lines muted except for the speaker and me, and then if you want to contribute, and we're going to certainly make this an interactive session, you raise your hand, and either Gretchen Wright or I will call on you, and then we'll be able to know that you want to speak, and then you'll need to press *6 to unmute your line. So you raise your hand and use *6 to unmute, and then we'll be able to communicate. So I'm really thrilled about having this session. It's called Professional Self-Presentation Strategies for Success. And we've been talking to you all year about, presenting yourself professionally, how to do the interviews, how to make your posters and your slides look attractive. So I thought it would be really helpful to hear from a pro on this. So I've invited Gretchen Wright, who is with the Human Capital Communication Team, and she's the Vice President and Principal at PR Solutions. And I think probably you all know her because she's been at most of our meetings, and we're about ready to make her a nurse educator because she's been passed through all of our content. And you may not know that she graduated from the University of Michigan, and she has done many projects in addition to the one that she's doing for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the one that we're involved in. And her focus is on managing communication projects for health-related companies. So, Gretchen, I'm going to turn this over to you, and we'll just go forth here.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Wright, I'll hold the phone for the next hour and a half.
Okay, and we've got everybody should be on mute, and I think, are they now? The line's muted, so we don't have any background noise. Sounds pretty good to me, Gretchen, so okay. I think we're ready. Yeah.
All right. I'll just hop right into it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to just sort of leap right into why we're doing this today. Starting by saying that really the way you look, the way you sound are as important as what you're saying, because they really are the things that help people either focus on what you're saying or they detract from what you're saying. I've actually heard it said that they say something like 90% of life is showing up. I've also heard that it's 90% what you look like, 10% what you say. But ultimately, it matters what you're saying and the way that you're saying it and what you look like when you're saying it matter, because you want people to focus on the content of what you're saying and to think that it's credible. We always recommend that when people are in a professional setting, they dress as if they're sort of the next rung up the ladder, and it's kind of it's a different take on what Carson Kressley, for anybody who's ever watched Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, like I did, ever said. He likes to say you have to overdress for a party. That way you can always say you're going to a better party later. You want to look like you're on the next rung up the ladder. And really, basically you can never go wrong with a suit. Not that kind of suit. This kind of suit. That means, a suit and a tie, or at least a jacket, tie, and trousers for men, something suit-like for a woman. A sweater that looks like it's a jacket is fine. We just sort of recommend that anything you would wear to a party or anything you'd wear to a football game or a playground isn't something you should be wearing to do a presentation or in a setting where you have to present professionally. And that includes what I refer to as blue jean stand-ins. Everybody knows, you would never wear blue jeans to a conference or to a professional conference, but we also have leggings, corduroy trousers, true khakis also are not really something you want to wear to a professional conference. And if you're going to be presenting, you don't want to wear anything that's going to detract from what you're saying. So, a button that sort of has a particular message on it that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. If it has everything to do with what you're talking about, then wear it. The most peculiar tie you've ever bought are probably things that you should stay away from. You want everyone to focus really on what you're saying and less on what you look like. In addition to sort of the tailoring of your suit, you want to pay attention to the tailoring of your presentation. You want to think about who is going to be in the audience, and based on who's going to be in the audience, you'll tailor your remarks to them. If you're speaking to an audience of researchers, for instance, they're going to want to hear about your methodology if you're discussing a study that you've done. If you're talking to hospital administrators or maybe community health program staff, you probably don't want to focus as much on your methodology as you would on the results of what you're doing or possibly the impetus for it. You want to sort of know exactly what people understand, where their heads are, they need to know.
Gretchen?
Yes.
This is Diane. Excuse me, I'm just going to interrupt a minute.
Sure.
There's background noise. Sounds like it's a baby. And just to remind everybody, since we can't mute the lines centrally, could everybody please be sure you are muted with #6, and then when you would like to speak, the easiest way for us to do it is for you to raise your hand, and then I'll call on you, and then we can do *6 to unmute. So everybody please be sure that you're muted with the #6, and then it'll be easier for all of us to hear. We'll wait just a sec, Gretchen, until we get that background noise taken care of. Okay, I think it sounds better to me. Does it to you?
I think so.
Okay, good. Thanks, everybody. Excuse me, Gretchen.
That's quite all right. Actually, I do one project with a bunch of moms who work at home, so I'm almost deaf to the sound of baby noises. I'm not used to hearing them on conference calls. So you want to think about what your audience understands. Whether or not it's possible to use specific research terminology and jargon, whether you can really use healthcare terminology and jargon that might not be understood by more of a lay audience. In my job, I deal with a whole series of sort of media kinds of materials, and I would never go to, for instance, an audience of nurses and start talking about op-eds and edit memos and edit board meetings, because I know those are terms they wouldn't understand. I would need to be able to define them before I jumped into discussing any of those things. So you want to pay attention to sort of what your audience knows, what they understand, and then based on that, basically edit your presentation accordingly. And this sort of just goes back to the kinds of things people might care about and what you might focus on in different kinds of settings. In some cases, you really do want to focus on the methodology of a study that you did. Other times, for instance, if you're talking to policymakers, you might want to talk about the implications for healthcare policy of what you're doing. If you're talking to consumers, you might want to talk about what the impact and implications on their healthcare might be. And that said, most people are always very interested in the recommendations of any one study. You also want to pay a lot of attention to how long you have to speak and tailor your remarks accordingly. It's one thing to have an hour-long presentation. It's another thing entirely to have a 15-minute presentation. And I will say I once had to give a 20-minute presentation I had put together in only 7 minutes because the speaker who went before me went for so long, and I was the last person on the agenda, that I really needed to sort of rush through everything I was saying. And it was a little bit difficult, and I sort of wished that the person who'd gone ahead of me had stuck to her time a little better. I always take off my watch and set it on the table in front of me or on the podium, just so that I can keep an eye on it and know how much time I've got. And if you're going to take questions, you want to factor that into the length of your presentation. If you're going to have an hour presentation, but you want to leave 15 minutes for questions, you want to then tailor your presentation so that you're able to take questions. You don't want to promise to take questions and then not be able to do it. And it's important to practice, unless you really have uncanny presentation skills, it's good to practice what you're going to say, time it, do it again. If you're going to take questions, you should think about the kinds of questions that you might get asked so that you're prepared to answer them. If you're going to be working with a PowerPoint presentation, you should know how to advance your slides. Various different kinds of software and different kinds of hardware work different ways, and I've seen people in conferences spend 3 to 5 minutes trying to figure out how to advance their slides, and that eats up the time when they could be discussing the findings of research, making their presentation. You also want to work on any sort of verbal tics that you have. I know that it's almost impossible to eradicate them completely, but if you discover that you're saying like or or a whole lot, it tends to detract from what you're saying. So you want to work on trying to smooth those things out. Have a PowerPoint presentation. You want something that captures people's attention in a variety of ways. Depending on your audience, that might be charts and graphs, it might be photographs, it might even be cartoons. I am a firm believer that a little bit of humor never hurts. You can get people to laugh a little bit. It's always it's always a good thing. It means they're listening, it means they're looking, it means they're reading. Do not read your slides to your audience. Nothing loses people faster than having someone stand before them and read the words on a slide. Talk about the slides and use them to illustrate your points, not as your script. I think that pretty much speaks for itself.
Cute.
And if you're going to use charts, be sure that you use charts that people can understand. I've pulled a couple of really amazing examples of what I, anyway, think are utterly incomprehensible charts. There may be people watching and listening who completely understand what it is that they're looking at, but I don't know what this is. I do not know what that is supposed to be trying to tell me, and I have zero idea what that is. So if you've got a research audience or an audience of people who have a great deal of background in charts and graphs and that kind of thing, you might be able to use these kinds of slides. But if you've got an audience that is more lay, you want to use charts that are really easy to read, particularly because they're going to be up on a screen, that if people glance at them, they can immediately understand what the information is that you're trying to convey. In addition, if you're going to use charts and slides, you don't want to use so many that you're just showing a PowerPoint of slide after slide after slide after slide. You want to highlight the best data points and the ones that are most well captured with a graph or a table so that you've got something that's really illustrative and that people can really understand, as opposed to seeing people's eyes glaze over as slide after slide after slide goes by. And if you're using a PowerPoint presentation, it's always a good idea to use a template. It's much easier than trying to create your own. Microsoft has 2 billion templates. A whole bunch are in their Vista or XP systems, and you can download others. There are a lot of options for templates. You can change the color scheme if you don't like the one that is presented. You can also do a lot of other things to modify it. If it's got a line or something where you want to have text, you can usually change the template to accommodate whatever you're doing. You want consistent-looking slides. You don't want slides that are sort of completely different and all over the map, because, once again, it detracts from what you're saying. People spend a lot of time looking at the line that keeps bouncing around on your slides and spend less time actually focusing on the words that you're saying. But if you are going to use a template, be judicious about it, because there are some pretty horrible-looking templates for slides out there. I do not like this one. This is just peculiar. And that's, while quite pretty, it's very sort of wallpaper-y looking. So you want to kind of think about the information you're going to be presenting and the PowerPoint template or the Prezi template that will best present your information without detracting from it. This is crucial. I'm a freak for typographical errors because I work in communications. But spelling errors and typos and errors in punctuation are the kinds of things that can sort of hurt your credibility and draw away from what you're saying. Have somebody else look at your presentation before you present it. If you're a person who has trouble with homonyms, with there, and there, and your, and it's, ask somebody else to take a look at it, because there will be somebody, at least one person in the audience, who's sitting there and goes, that's the wrong version of it's. It shouldn't have an apostrophe in it. And they'll be thinking that instead of thinking about, wow, this is absolutely fascinating. And you want to keep your audience engaged, as I said. You want to try to elicit some kind of response from your audience. You can do that in a number of ways. A great thing to do is to do sort of a show of hands. That way you know if people are listening to you or not. You ask a question, how many of you have ever been on a diet, made a New Year's resolution, tried running a marathon, anything that's related to the work that you're doing. Ask questions. What's the happiest ward in your hospital? Or you can even make a joke, even a joke that flops, that makes everybody kind of groan because it's such a terrible old joke, gets them to react to you and gets you some kind of response. I also think that bad jokes are sort of humanizing. But so things that keep people's attention, babies work. Also, anything that's fluffy and cute. I love this. This is actually off Facebook, and I like the line, the kitten is just here to get your attention. But you stop and you look at it because there's a little fluffy kitten on it. Now, I'm not saying your entire presentation should be covered with babies and kittens and fluffy chicks and the grumpy cat, but used sparingly in the right places, it is possible to actually use these things in a way that helps the presentation. And frankly, when you're working in healthcare, you probably find more opportunities than not to sneak a baby in to a PowerPoint presentation. It's also fun to use an element of surprise. My husband is a housing economist who speaks around the country about what kind of projections there are in terms of the housing market, which, as you can imagine, the last couple of years has been an extremely important topic. And a few years ago, he was in North Dakota, and he's standing in front of a group of home builders, and they had the local news there, and he said, now, a lot of people, when they hear that I'm going to tell them about the housing projections for the next several months, a word comes into their minds, and it's a 4-letter word. It begins with the letter F, and there it is. And everybody in the audience sort of giggled, and they thought that was quite amusing. But the thing that's truly remarkable about this is that that's the part of his speech that got onto the local news. It caught enough attention that they decided it was sort of a funny, clever way to encapsulate what he was talking about in terms of people's basic terror of what's going to be happening in the housing market. So there's presentations you might be doing. Other opportunities to be talking to people are media interviews. I think I have tricked some of you into doing various media interviews. But when you're doing an interview, you want to know right up front what kind of media outlet you're going to be talking to, because that media outlet is going to have, in some cases, a pretty specific audience, and you want to be sure to tailor what you're saying to them. If you're talking to a nursing trade, they want to know what your research means for nursing, what kinds of education practices you're using to educate nurses. They want to know about practice. They want to know about nursing leadership. If you were talking to Healthcare Finance News and you're talking about some research that you've done, they want to know how your findings can affect the way healthcare is paid for, or how they can reduce the cost of healthcare, or how they drive up the cost of healthcare. If you're talking to the New York Times, they want information for the general public. They want to know not how this necessarily affects an individual healthcare system or how it necessarily affects nurses. They want to know what that means to the average person. If you're talking about, and I'm speaking from experience here because we just worked on this, a study that finds that having more nurses with bachelor's degrees in a hospital reduces post-surgery mortality. Advance for Nurses wants to know more about the methodology behind that. They want to know sort of what that means for nurse staffing. Healthcare Finance News wants to know what that means for cost of healthcare. The New York Times wants to know what patients should be looking for when they come into a hospital in terms of how many nurses they should be seeing around them. But you really want to think about how you're going to tailor the remarks you make in an interview to the audience for the particular outlet that you're talking to. And before you do an interview, you want to think about what you're going to need to convey in the interview, the best way to do that, and also the questions you might get asked and how you're going to address those questions. The quote that's on here is actually from a really wonderful reporter with Washington State National Public Radio Station. She really thinks hard about putting together the best story she can. So when she comes to somebody for an interview, she gives them a sense of everything about the story and exactly where they fit into it, so they know what kind of information she wants from them, and they can tailor their quote. Unfortunately, most reporters are not this careful or this thoughtful, so you need to do that yourself. Find out what the outlet is so that you know who the audience is for that outlet. Think about the questions you might get asked based on that. Come up with answers for them. And not only does that sort of save you time sort of pondering responses in the course of the interview, but it also ensures that you get out the message that you want to get out in an interview, which is, well, frankly, the only reason to be doing an interview. Another thing to remember is when you're talking to a reporter, your audience isn't that reporter. Your audience is, in this case, the person on the other side of the television screen. A lot of people, when they're talking to reporters, sort of begin to feel like they're really kind of educating the reporter, and particularly if you're talking to mainstream reporters, a reporter with a local newspaper, local TV or radio station, unfortunately, they're not going to remember a lot of what you said, and you want to spend more of your time thinking past them to whoever their audience is. Moving away from interviews to photos. If you're going to be doing presentations, if you're going to be on panels, it's generally if you're going to be doing interviews in many cases, it's a good idea to have a headshot. You want to have all possible professional headshot, and I happen to know that most of you, if not all, have got headshots that we had taken at annual meetings by our friend Mel Epps. And so if anybody needs their headshot from one of those annual meetings, if you shoot me an email at gretchen@prsolutionsdc.com, or you let Jen or Tanya know that you'd like your headshot, they'll let me know, and I'd be more than happy to email it to you. If you don't have a headshot or you want to have one taken, these are just a couple of tips. All of these pictures is basically what I'm saying here. You want to, if you're a woman, you want to be wearing makeup, but you don't want to be having a glamour shot. You don't want weird light kinds of things. I assume Benjamin James is some sort of a musician, and you don't want a black and white shot. You want something where you're professionally dressed, where you look like you would if you were standing behind a podium giving a presentation. This is the time to look professional and credible. No voguing. Smile. Don't scowl in the picture. And you want to have a headshot that is both, if you're having it taken on a digital camera, that is both, you want one that's high resolution and one that's lower resolution. When you all become members of Sigma Theta Tau, I will let you know that Reflections on Nursing Leadership, which is their publication, always asks for photographs of anybody who's a member of theirs who they feature in the publication. So I'm always running around getting headshots of various and sundry people to add to Reflections on Nursing Leadership when they run an article. And also recommend that you have pictures that are fairly recent. within the last 2 to 3 years. It's confusing to people when they get a program for a meeting and they sort of look through and they see the photographs of people, and then someone's presenting and they have no idea initially from looking at the panel who the person whose photo is in front of them is. It's a little confusing. Everybody always wants to have their best possible picture used, but it's also a good idea to have the best possible fairly recent picture used if you can swing it. In addition to photographs, you frequently will be asked for bios. You want to have a couple different versions, and I also want to distinguish a bio from a CV. Your CV is going to be way too long for anybody to want to include in a program. For your average agenda or program, you want a couple of paragraphs that describe sort of the highlights of who you are, the highlights of your work, where you are now, any sort of relevant awards or presentations or publications that you've had. It's also a good idea, though, to have a 1 or 2 sentence bio that can be included. For instance, if you were to write a blog or write a guest editorial for a local newspaper, they could include that 1 or 2 sentence that kind of establishes that you're a credible source for the information that you're providing. You want to talk about yourself in the third person in a bio of either kind and keep the tone pretty factual. You want to stay away from all the sort of wonderful, glowing adjectives that you could be putting in front of everything that you've done. You want to kind of keep it sort of cold, factual, and basic. And I think Diane would like to actually say a word or two about CVs.
Well, I see these two as kind of a marketing, presenting yourself in the right light, and it's really important that you have your headings focusing on the things that you do best. And I know I've given feedback to quite a few of you last year where I was helping you focus on your research now that you have some going, and particularly the group that we have here today primarily are doctoral students, and the main thing about you is the fact that you're doing research. So, and that's probably what the people who are interviewing you are going to be thinking about. And then, Gretchen, I have a question about photos and the CV.
Yes.
Should people have a photo with the CV, and when they're doing the letter of intent or letter responding to a position, should they put a photo?
I would tend to say no. In most cases, it seems a little odd to people to enclose your photograph. If they want a picture, people will ask for one. And in most cases, a photo is asked for if you're going to be doing some kind of presentation or panel or something. Less so if you're coming in for an interview or that kind of a thing. It seems a little unusual. Yeah. Unless you're specifically asked for a photograph, it seems a little unusual to provide one.
Okay. I would kind of, from being on the receiving end of, looking at applications, I would say the same thing. And the scholars have been, developing portfolios as well. And my sense of that is not to have photos in there either. It's, it's an accumulation of your work and putting it forth in a professional way, just in the same way that you're using your bio and your CV.
Yeah, I would say that you want your work to speak for itself. And in much the same way that you wouldn't show up with hair standing straight up on end and gigantic earrings and thigh-high boots to make a presentation that says, "Look at me."
Yes, right.
There's no reason to send a photograph along with information about your body of work that says, "Look at me."
Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting parallel. Anyway.
Yeah, this is great. Okay.
Then business cards. Business cards are, speaking as a person who unfortunately has an entire drawer full of them because she keeps leaving them in her office, do not be like me. Business cards are incredibly useful. They're, of course, obviously a really easy way to give a person a way to get in touch with you. And it could be anybody. It's a good idea to take them with you in a little tiny holder every place because you obviously we want to be using them at conferences and summits and that kind of thing. But it's also something you might discover that you need to use at a party of some kind or a reception. If you're talking to somebody and they say, "Oh, I'd really like to follow up with you on that," it's great if you can just hand them your business card as opposed to having them take out their phone and laboriously try to type in your contact information using their thumbs. So it's important to have a business card. If you don't have one through your institution, it is pretty easy to make them. Frequently, institutions will have rules about if you're going to list your institution on the card, what kind of information you can have on it and what it should look like. But if you've got latitude, once again, as with PowerPoint presentations, templates, there are millions of templates out there. You just want one that is clean and easy and doesn't have too much cutesiness or stuff or color on it. And Avery Labels actually is one company that makes the cards that you can put into a printer. So you can pick the template for the card, stick the Avery labels into the printer, and this card's in exactly the right size. There's a particular size that you can get, which I, of course, do not know off the top of my head. You just want them to be readable, professional looking, and on the issue of sort of being able to get in touch with somebody, when it comes to email addresses, which are email signatures, which I think of both as a little bit like your electronic business card, you want to be sure that you've got a professional email address and signature. If your normal email is furrykitty@gmail.com or drknowsitall@yahoo.com, that's not necessarily the email that you want to use to, for instance, send in an abstract or to submit an article for a journal publication. You want something that is much more simple, that has either your first and last name or your first initial and last name, and sometimes they throw a number in there too. But you want to steer away from anything that makes you look less than serious about what you're doing. And also, if you've got a signature in your email that maybe says something super inspirational to you and your friends, but isn't terribly meaningful to other people, that may not be something you want to use in a professional setting. And it can be as easy as just setting up a separate email account. Gmail, Yahoo, are free, and you can just sort of set up a separate email account and keep the fuzzy kitty gmail.com with, I love you, have a nice day signature for your friends. Another thing that is useful to have everywhere all the time, kind of like a business card, is an elevator speech. And it's called an elevator speech, and many of you have probably heard of these, because it is a speech that you could give about yourself and your work that could be conveyed in the amount of time that it takes to ride between floors in an elevator. So it's really short. 30 to 60 seconds is generally all you've got, and you may have more than one elevator speech. You may have an elevator speech about being a part of the New Jersey Nursing Initiative. You might have an elevator speech about your research. You might have an elevator speech about your institution. You might have an elevator speech about a particular organization that you belong to or work with. So if somebody says to you, so I understand that you're a New Jersey nursing scholar, what's that? You want to be able to, in 30 to 60 seconds, say what a New Jersey nursing scholar is, what the New Jersey Nursing Initiative is, and why it's important, why it matters, why it was created. And you can write it out. It's about 150 words, maybe 2 sentences, maybe 3. But it's always good to be able to explain briefly, quickly, and well what it is that you're involved in when you're at a cocktail party, when you're at a reception, when you're at a conference where you're sort of moving from person to person and talking and meeting various people. You can give your elevator speech, chat for a bit, hand them your business card, and move on to the next person. Social media. Social media, for all that can be used for terrible purposes or silly purposes, can also be incredibly useful to spread the word about the work that you do, the research you're involved in. It's a great way to network. It's a great way to find people who are involved in similar things, to share ideas, to share news. NJNI has got a Facebook page and a LinkedIn group, and we would hope that everybody has liked the Facebook page and joined the LinkedIn group, because there are discussions in both. There are a lot of articles and conversations and news that are provided in both places. And you also might want to think about in this setting as well, if you're already on Twitter, you're already on Facebook, LinkedIn usually doesn't matter. If you have kind of a personal account, sometimes it's a good idea to separate and have also a professional account. My sister's a college professor, and she has only what she refers to as her professional Facebook account because her students want to friend her. And she says, they don't need to know about my personal life. So I don't post pictures of my dogs, and I don't reveal details of my life on my Facebook page. It's actually where I just put information about the fascinating world of post-colonial comparative literature. So I'm going to break these down a little bit. If you're on Twitter, among the things we would hope you would follow would be the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. There are a lot of feeds. The school that you're at probably has a Twitter feed of its own, and there is a host of researchers and healthcare and health policy experts of all kinds who are on Twitter, who are posting information about news articles, about research, about grants, about videos that have been posted on YouTube. There's just all kinds of stuff that's out there on Twitter. And it's an opportunity also. If you publish something, you can provide a link to the abstract. I know you can almost never provide a link to the actual article. On Twitter, just published about such and such. More information here. It's a good way to kind of reach out, keep people up to date on what you're doing. And you can do something very, very similar using Facebook. I will say that I happen to prefer Facebook because it's more visual and I can kind of see what I'm looking at. On Facebook also you can post, if you have the time and the energy to make an infographic, you can post infographics about your research. If you give a presentation, you can, and you want to share it on Facebook, you can post the presentation on YouTube and then have a link on Facebook to it. Facebook is also a place where a lot of organizations post information about conferences and meetings. Backing up a little bit, a lot of organizations, when they have special meetings, will actually have them live tweeted on Twitter, so you can follow the proceedings without actually being there in a way where you get sort of quick, digestible information. Mm-hmm. And LinkedIn is sort of the most, I think it was sort of the most professional of these three social media. It was intended to be sort of the professional version of Facebook. People update their professional status, update their achievements, talk about their publications. They post queries to peers and colleagues about work that they're doing. They might ask about research methods. They might ask about teaching methods, all those kinds of things. And there are a wide variety, really, really, really wide variety of groups on LinkedIn you can go to and join and get all kinds of information about issues and areas that are important to you. I do want to mention two other social media sites that you may or may not be familiar with. Academici.net or academici.net, I'm not sure, is intended for researchers and academics. It's got interest groups, and people post all kinds of events and conferences related to their academic interests on it. And then there's also mynetresearch.com, which clearly is for researchers, where you can find people to collaborate on research with, where you can solicit advice about grant writing, tenure, promotion, teaching, grant applications, and so I would encourage people to take a look at those. And the last social media I'm going to talk about is blogs. Some people like to and have the time to and are inspired to do their own blogs. You could blog about the progress of a particular research project. I know that somebody with the Interdisciplinary Nursing Quality Research Initiative is blogging about her trip doing research with nurses in Australia. And so she's got this sort of ongoing blog where she posts every couple of days and really short sort of updates on what she's doing. If you're, and you can, Blogspot, or I think now it's called Blogger, and WordPress are both free blogging platforms where you can set things up. If you are interested in the idea of blogging about something that's important to you or your research findings, many of you have probably been approached by me or my colleagues because we work on the Human Capital blog for RWJF, and that's a place that we're always looking for posts. We're looking for new, interesting ideas related to your work with the foundation or anything related to health and healthcare that folks at RWJF might be interested in. A lot of people, their colleges, their universities have blogs. Sometimes the School of Nursing has its own blog. So there's an opportunity there. And a lot of associations and organizations, care professional associations and organizations, also have blogs, and sometimes they're looking for someone. So if you're interested in sort of getting the word out about something in an unfiltered way where you can sort of express your opinions and provide information based on your expertise, a blog is kind of a good way to go. And it's something that it counts as a publication. It's something you can drive people to. And if you're on Facebook and you're on Twitter, of course, you can post a link to your blog on Facebook or LinkedIn, and you can tweet about it. And on the topic of sharing information, I want to actually give a little pitch for being sure to stay in touch with the NJNI office. And if you're doing, if you've got any news about stuff that you're doing related to NJNI or related to nursing or nursing education, we'd love to know. We'd love to be able to share that information in the NJNI newsletter or on the website, or maybe both, and the RWJ website as well. Tracy Perrin, for instance, when she was doing a presentation based on her research into bullying, she let us know about it, and so we were able to include an article about that. Mm-hmm. So this is just a little pitch. Please share information about what you're doing. Right.
Well, not only is it a good pitch, but it's kind of good networking for whoever's giving you the information, because where your audience is receptive to these ideas and maybe looking for somebody who's doing similar research or who they would like to come speak or something like that. And while I'm here, we're still getting quite a bit of background noise. It sounds like there's somebody where there's other people in the room with them. And again, the way to mute your line is to push *6. So if everybody could please do that, I think will make it easier for the people that are speaking. So thank you again for doing that. Okay, sorry, Gretchen.
That's okay. I was just about to say I'm happy to answer any questions people might have. I think you can I'm not sure what the process is, letting the operator know that you want to ask a question, or you can post one in the chat section.
Yes, or they can raise their hand, and then we can ask them to unmute. That's sometimes how we do that, but we certainly can do any of those, the chat room or the raising your hand. So, Gretchen, you've given us so many great ideas, and I'm just sitting here thinking of, these are so important, and I've seen so many bad examples of just about everything that you've talked about. And while people are thinking about a question here and getting ready to raise their hand, I'll say I was at a meeting on Wednesday where two young women from our School of Art were making a presentation to the School of Nursing for us to contract with them to do some artwork with them. And those women came over with this straggliest hair I've seen in a long time, in clothes that look like they'd just come out of the art studio, and they were not dressed for success when they came to pitch their work, and they had a new company that they were trying to solicit business. So, and they were presenting to, people like me and other nursing faculty who, have an idea of what dressing for success looks like. So that, I just can't say it enough. There's points in time where it's fine to be casual and comfortable, but at other times when you're trying to sell yourself, that you have to match up your seriousness with your professional image. So Marianne McDermott has a comment. So Marianne, I'll call on you, and *6 to unmute.
Thank you so much for this presentation. And I just wanted to interject here that another place besides a more public presentation where you talked about preparing for a presentation with the timing and to practice, and I say stand in front of a mirror and practice and put on a timer. That's how compulsive I am about that. But there are many, many students, and maybe all, in the audience today, and some who aren't here yet, who are getting ready to defend their dissertations and what they wear and how they conduct themselves, regardless of their other relationship outside of that room with their chair or members, whether it's friendly and, you've gone to that. This is all business, and practice, 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 and you are the expert. So, and just answer questions, everything you said at the very basic level is important for their dissertation presentation. It just makes it so much better all around. Anyhow.
Great point. And, I like that first slide about, dress like you're going to even a better party afterwards. You never know who you're going to be seeing when you're out and about. So you want to be sure that you're looking at least like you're ready to do something serious.
Well, 100 years ago when I was, it feels like 100, but I still remember all of the getting ready, and there were a whole, a cohort of us, and at different times within a semester getting ready to defend. And the word at that time was, do you have a power suit? And that meant not a cutesy little top and bottom. It meant a suit, top and bottom matched. I mean, in those days, you do whatever now. But, it's not a turtleneck. We wore a blouse. Everything that you really touched on, but appropriate for today's styles. But casual is in today, and this is not casual. You will only do this first defense once in your whole life.
That's right. Exactly.
Anyway, so I will mute myself before I...
Okay, well, thanks for your comments. And
thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
Wonderful.
And other comments or experiences to share? I'd be interested in hearing from some of the scholars to see if, first of all, if you have questions, and secondly, if you've had witnessed experiences or have experiences that you could share. Okay, I'm looking for raised hands. I think everybody probably knows how to use that icon. So, Gretchen, how many people do you think use social media in the professional world? Is that a pretty common thing that you're seeing from your end?
Yes, and it's growing. I think initially there was a lot of resistance to things like Facebook and Twitter and even blogging, but increasingly they're moving away from being something that's used by kids and more towards people trying to figure out professional applications of these things.
Okay.
So yes, it looks like actually Lisa Heelan and Ola Loba both.
Okay, well we'll call Lisa first, and then we'll go to Aloha. Okay, Lisa.
Hi, you were just asking for experiences when we've had interviews or whatever, and I just want to share that my mother always told me you dress for the job you want, not the job that you currently have.
Oh, what a great idea. Yeah.
So I thought I'd share it with everybody.
Yes. Yeah, it's so important.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah. And did you, Ola, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add that in our school at Rutgers, for the second cohort, we're being trained to dress professionally, because even if we have a class presentation, they want us to come do that presentation in a professional attire. So
wonderful.
It surely makes us feel very important.
Yes.
And Dr. Billings, you're a very good example for us. We always see you dress professionally.
Well, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Other comments? Questions? Any further thoughts about a professional presentation of yourself? Gretchen, I think you've really covered all the high points, and I would urge the scholars, some of them are going to be on spring break coming up here, that they go through each of these points and make sure that everything's all in order, that they have a good interview suit and a good presentation suit, that they have a professional headshot, that they have, that they're, we have, I think one thing that I've noticed, it's really important is to have a good email address. Even now I send out some of these emails and they aren't going to the most professional of email addresses, so I would say that. Get your business card. Get your CV tuned up, because many of you now are going to be in the position of doing interviews. Get that bio ready to go, your elevator speech, all of those things. Now is a good time to tune them up and have them at the ready. So any further thoughts? I think we've, from what I can see on here for the participants, that we've got everybody that had a hand raised. Gretchen,
Great.
do you?
Okay. No, it's just it's sort of funny that as I've gotten older, I've come to believe more and more and more in sort of dressing professionally, and somewhere my mother is laughing her head off. But it really, it's not a matter of sort of trying to make anybody look, behave, or act differently than they really are. It's a matter of ensuring that people are listening to you, that they believe what you're saying, that they find you credible, and that you're able to persuade them. And you can't persuade anybody if they're spending a lot of time thinking, jeans with holes in them, really?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's just I can't just say from my receiving end how important it is that all these things take place, because you never know where your CV is going or who's going to be in an audience that might be thinking about how they could network with you, and you're always when you're in a professional situation, you want to have your best foot forward.
I can't tell if Lisa had another question or her hand is just still.
Oh.
Yeah, those hands, unless they put them down, they'll stay up. So, well, Gretchen, I'm going to thank you for bringing all this information to our attention, and I'll also say that you did a great job of role modeling how to do the slides. I get inspired from seeing well-done slides, so and a nice presentation, too. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, and for all the scholars and the faculty, we'll see you in April. We're going to be sending out a little invitation or a little save the date with our next session with Joanne Dish about the leadership workshop and the commencement or recognition of our graduating scholars. So we'll see you again. Stay safe, stay warm. Hope that spring comes your way soon. Okay, I think we can end the session. Gretchen, thanks again.
Sure, thank you.